I've always, since I can remember, wanted to be a professional race car driver.
Ed Paez from Houston, Texas, at the wheel right now for the 80 team.
We had a race team that we drove in the Grand Am Rolex and Cup Series back in 2001.
Welcome to Why This Ride, the show where we dive into the stories behind the rides we love. I'm your host, Jason Huckabee, filling in for Tim McCallis, and I have with us today Ed Paez, a 30-year veteran of the automotive industry, ex-race car driver, and sales manager for the Bespoke Auto Pro family. He brought his 95 E36, and he's going to tell us all about it. Thanks for coming, Ed.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So what got you into cars to begin with?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, that goes back to all the way being a kid. I've always, since I can remember, wanted to be a professional race car driver. And I grew up in Chicago, and every summer we would tend to go on a trip, and we would go up to the Wisconsin Dells. And up there at the time, they had a ton of like go-kart tracks. And I still remember to this day, one of the best days of my life is when I ran over by myself, right? My parents were in the hotel. I ran over a couple doors down to the go-kart track, and I was finally tall enough to meet the height restriction for the line to be able to go and drive one of the carts. So I ran back, got the $1.50 from my parents, came back, and went out on track and had fun. I got pushed into the tires, and I got put back out and came back next to him, and then something inside me just took over, and I took that driver out and ended up kind of lapping, and I think I probably won, I don't know, but I was so small, I'm not surprised because of how light I probably was compared to the
Right.
adults that were in those carts. But I don't know, it just spawned a desire to race, and I've always had an interest in German cars in particular,
Yeah.
ever since I was little.
Well, I think everybody has a go-kart story. It's funny as you were saying that, I remember we were on vacation
Yeah.
and we had a similar event where there was a go-kart track right outside the condo or the hotel we were staying at. And I went over there, and what's funny is the place we were staying, you had this like key card or badge, and if you showed them the key card, they'd let you ride the goat kart. Well, I didn't realize they were charging the room, and I must have done 30 laps or 30 sessions on this goat kart track. Had the best day ever, until my parents got the bill, when we were checking out, and they wanted to know why.
Probably
You know,
weren't too happy about
Probably
that.
weren't too happy about that, so but that's interesting. So growing up in Chicago, so did you immediately get into karting? Is that how you got into racing?
Uh, I had an older brother who was almost 20 years older, and he used to do autocrossing. And
Okay.
so he had an old BMW 2002, and we would go out to these autocross events, which autocross is, as you know, we're just in a big parking lot typically with cones, and it's one driver at a time going around. And so he would take me out there, and I would sit there all day and watch him doing it, watch other drivers doing it, and he was a big car guy as well, and I think he kind of also inspired that desire for me to be into cars. And then as I got older, when I got my license, I started doing some autocrossing myself. I had an '83 RX-7 that was, I did a few mods to it and did some autocrossing with that, and I sold that car and got a 74 914 2-liter, and that was a car that I did some autocrossing in and had a real good time. That was my daily driver up in Chicago, summer, winter,
That's a
every
good car
day.
to autocross too.
Yeah.
Very lightweight.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I got protested a lot because that car had so much adjustability from the factory that you could really tweak the suspension settings, and I had that car so low where literally the roof of the car was below my waist.
Oh, wow.
And but people would protest me all the time as far as it not being legal, but it was because it was within the factory spec.
Wow. That's so impressive. So, okay, so take me through it then. So how did you get into actually racing?
Well, I went from autocrossing, obviously, when I moved down to Houston. This was in 1998. I was looking for a job, and I went around to car dealerships and whatnot, to try and get a sales position. Well, I saw one dealer, Momentum BMW, down on the southwest side, and they had a sign that said test track coming soon. And I said, that's where I want to work. And so I got a job there selling BMWs. But see, they had this performance center behind the BMW dealership that was a really cool facility. It was right in between Porsche and BMW, and it was a separate building, and they had a test track behind there, a little road course with a skid pad that would wet down, a cobblestone area that you could drive on. And so I moved in to manage that. So I was managing the performance center, and then we took it a step further and we got the dealership involved and we started a race team. We had a race team that we drove in the Grand Am Rolex and Cup Series back in 2001. And so I did the 6 hours of the Glen in 2001 in a GT3R, and the
Right
greatest
on.
thing was I was being paid to do it, right? Which if you're into racing, most of the time you're paying to race and not the other way around. So it was a great experience. We also did some 993 Cup car, and that we did Mid Ohio, Trail Riviera in Canada, Road America in Wisconsin, which is one of my favorite tracks. And, so it progressed pretty quickly. It went from autocrossing to thrown into professional racing, which I will say the first race, I really call it more survival rather than, racing, honestly. But
Wow. And so do you still get to race today?
unfortunately not. What stopped that whole racing career was we were set to fly to Daytona on September 11, 2001.
Oh,
And so we're getting ready to go to the airport, and we look and the news hits and we see airplanes hitting buildings, and they grounding all the airplanes. So then we knew, okay, well, obviously with the trauma of everyone was experiencing what was going on in the country, what happened with the race was they ended up canceling the race. And that race, just for me personally, I was going to be driving at Daytona with Darren Law, who was a professional driver and who now is one of the owners of Flying Lizard Motorsport. But and it was a race that for me personally could have been a pivotal point in making professional racing an actual full-time career for me.
wow.
And so I know that unfortunately that was a really bad day for the country, but for me personally, it was a day that killed my racing career. And since then, I used to put on a lot of track events at different tracks in Texas and teach people how to drive at tracks. Just didn't have the opportunity to do any racing, really almost at any level after that because we had some kids and my priorities shifted. And so I was occupied doing other things. As much as I wanted to get back out there and race, it just wasn't
Right.
able to happen at that time.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I am happy that you do go around and share your love of racing. I've had the pleasure of going to a track day with you and chasing this around the track, and it is surprisingly nimble and fast. Even if you're in a more powerful vehicle, it's surprising how well this gets around the course.
Well, you touched on a good point because when you're talking about racing on a track, the last thing you need is horsepower. I mean, really, what makes a good race car is something that's going to handle good, that's going to stop good. And for the casual driver, if you're just wanting to go do some DE events or anything like that, the first thing I tell everybody is get some good tires and get a harness. Because if you have good tires, that's going to make a huge difference in how your car behaves on track. And a harness is a big deal because if you don't have one, you're gonna be holding yourself with the steering wheel and you're gonna get tired, and it's also gonna affect your ability to properly be able to shift or handle or brake, much quicker than if you are strapped in. Like this car, for example, has Sparco race seats in it, a 5-point harness in there, on the driver's side, and it's half caged in the back, and full Bilstein coilover suspension, adjustable sway bars, and strut braces. As far as the handling goes, this car handles really, really well. The one thing it is lacking a little bit is horsepower. This is not an M3. It's a 325 IS. So it's the M50 motor that on a good day was probably 180 horsepower. And this thing, given the fact that it's a 30-year-old car, it does have a tune on it, but it's still probably be lucky to be pushing 170 horsepower at this point. But
You know, you wouldn't know it. When I see you flying around the track and the tires are squealing, you would never know it. You would think this is a 400 horsepower monster, you know.
yeah, it may be someday. We'll see. That may be coming. But yeah, for it's fun to drive a slow car fast. And so this car here is, when you're on the carousel at MSR down there, I'm in fourth gear flat out the entire way. And it does like to shoot a little bit of fire out the back, which is always cool to watch. But it's a fun car, and for me, that's what was fun. I didn't care what kind of car I was driving. If you're racing other people, if you're competitive, to me that makes it more fun. If it's the driver that makes the difference.
Right. Well, and do you like that you can work on the car? Because I know
Yeah.
a lot of newer cars, you can't do as much to them because of all the electronics.
Exactly, and that's when I was running that performance center at Momentum is kinda when I fell in love with the E36. To me, it's the perfect size, it's clean, it doesn't have too much going on, it doesn't have too much electronics, and, at the track, when we would put on a lot of track events back then too, and the E36 is such a well-balanced car, almost perfect 50-50 weight distribution on this car and just fun to drive, still feel connected to the road. When you get to these newer cars, and there's nothing against the newer M3s or M4s, but they're bigger, they're heavier. There's so much electronics and traction controls and DCT transmissions and all these things going on that you lose a little bit of that connection to the road, I think. And to me, the E36 is the perfect car. I drive this car every single day.
That you
And
do. We can hear you coming down the road before you get
yeah.
here.
It's, I've put in the last 5 years, I've put probably 50,000 miles on this car. And, I love it. I always wanted a car that I could drive that is more track car than street car, but that drive it on the street every day. And this car is not perfect, but frankly, who is? And so it isn't an M3. It's not trying to be an M3, but it's trying to be a fun daily driver that you can really go out and enjoy, and I do enjoy it.
Fantastic. So, okay, so if you were to make an upgrade to the car, what would that be?
Well, that's easy. The dream upgrade would be to put an S54 engine in here, which is the M3 engine out of an E46 M3, which would be from like 2001 to 2006. That would take this car just from 100 and whatever horsepower to 333 horsepower, normally aspirated, rev this thing out to 9,000 RPMs. That would be the dream engine swap.
Wow.
That along with some better brakes, this car would be perfect.
Okay. So if you didn't have this car, which car would you be trying to get?
Well, again, I like the E36 platform that much where if money were not an object and, if I won lotto tomorrow, the first car I'd probably go seek out would be an E36 Lightweight M3,
Okay.
which the lightweights were an M3. They were white. They had kind of that BMW flag graphic on the hood. They were a little bit lighter, and they also had the lightweight wing on the back and the adjustable splitter in the front. It was like the perfect M3 that they made, and they didn't make a whole lot of them, especially that got brought to the US. But that would be the car I'd probably go
The
after.
next one in the stable. So tell me about the hood or I'm sorry, the helmet.
So when I was a little kid, I used to love watching Speed Racer, right? Who didn't? Um, but I was always a bigger fan of Racer X than Speed Racer.
Okay.
And I just thought he was the better driver. I don't know. I liked his car. It was yellow and black, and he was cool, right? And so when I was driving, that's the helmet I used when I was racing professionally. It's painted to look like Racer X's head.
Okay.
That so it has his like hat or whatever it was he was wearing. On the back, it says Racer X, and that's the helmet I used, when I raced. I don't know. I just, was a big fan of his. I thought he was even a better driver than Speed Racer,
Oh,
but,
that's awesome. Okay.
so that's kinda where that came from.
Well, so what are your plans in the future for racing and track days and
Well, my plans are to continue to put on track events, now that we're with Bespoke. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm hoping that we can continue to grow our customer base and continue putting on some track events and/or maybe have a Bespoke sponsored car that we take out in one series, whether it be Lemons or whether it be club racing or whether it be something else, I think would be a blast.
we did talk about lemons,
Yeah.
didn't we? For the folks at home that may not know, why don't you tell them what lemons is?
Well, Lemons, you have the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which is the big race in June that happens in France every year, and that race has been going on for many, many years. And in terms of sports car racing, it's the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
It's the biggest race of the year. The only next to that would be the 24 Hours of Daytona. But years ago, and I don't know when it started, but somebody came up with the idea to do 24 Hours of Lemons. And it's basically a spoof version of the 24-hour race. But what you do is and they had a rule where your car couldn't have costed more than $500, but you had to have certain safety mods, and you would race other competitors in different classes, and it was whoever would get the most laps. Now, it wasn't a full 24 hours. They would do, I think, 2 8-hour races or 12-hour races. I'm not sure. And it was kind of fun. People would have themed cars, and you could get penalized for certain things and have to it was kind of they would spoof things. You'd have to do jumping jacks or something if your team got penalized. I mean, there were all these different penalties that you had to do that weren't necessarily traditional race penalties, and so it wasn't always the fastest car that won. It was amount of laps, and it has grown into a really big deal. They do these Lemons races all over the country, various times of the year, and it's a great way for someone who wants to get out there and do wheel to wheel racing to
Mhm.
experience it without having to have this enormous budget to do it.
Well, that's probably my next question. So, if you're wanting to get into racing, what is the quickest way, and what do you think is the best platform for them to do that?
Well, it's a great question. The easiest way for most people to get into some form of racing would be doing autocrossing, your local autocross. You can take your personal car and go to an autocross event. There's very little risk of damaging because it's one car out at a time on a cone course. And that's a way to at least get your toe in the water. But what I found was autocross, and the reason I wanted to make the transition to full-on road course racing was because during an autocross, a typical lap time is under a minute.
Yeah,
So you're out there all day long. You get 4 or 5 runs, each one is under a minute. You're getting very little track time.
gotcha.
And so when I would put on my track events, I would do them where somebody would come out and they'd get 7 hours of wide open track time to use at your disposal. And I would train people that needed training or whatnot. And so it was about getting more seat time. And so if you want to get into racing, there's club racing. There's a million different levels of SCCA club racing that you can do, from cars that are, inexpensive. There's Miata spec racing that is not crazy expensive. I will say that no matter what series you're running, there's going to be a difference between, competing and being competitive. And typically, the people that are the most competitive are spending the most money or have the most experience or knowledge, because to get to that last 10% from, up in that lead group, usually that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of different levels of racing, club racing. If you want to go pro racing, I think personally the best series to jump into, and from a pro racing standpoint, it's one of the least expensive ones, would be the MX5 Cup with a
Okay.
Miata race.
Yeah.
And it's new Miatas that are the engines are stock motors that are sealed. However, all the cars are the same. They're all built by one company in Florida. They're all caged, sequential gearbox, and they try and leave it up to the driver. But if you watch, like for example, the MX5 race that just happened at Daytona, it was a pre-race for the IMSA 24 Hours of Daytona race that happened. in one lap, you could have 10 lead changes. It's so competitive. It's so crazy racing. It's so fun to watch. And if you were going to be in one series, that would be a really fun one to jump into.
Wow. So where do you think like sim racing or computer racing fits into this?
Well, and I don't have a ton of experience with sim racing, as I know you do, but sim racing I think is a great platform for people to, either learn how to drive, learn certain tracks. My son used the sim race on his Xbox before he had his license, and when he got his license, his first car was a '99 Miata, no power steering, manual transmission, and he got in there and knew what to do right away. And I think it was from the sim racing, he knew all the mechanics of running a manual transmission and how to drive it, and I had him driving at MSR before he ever hit the street, before he had his license in that Miata. So sim racing, I think, is a great platform. I don't have a ton of experience with it. For me, when I drive a sim, I'm kind of lacking that actual G-force that you would feel in a
Right.
car, so I think that messes me up a little bit. Maybe I just haven't been on the right sim yet, I don't know, but,
Well, I think sim racing is similar to what you were saying with professional racing. It's about how much you spend, right? Because I'm in a sim racing league, and it's the expense of the sim itself, and then also the hours that you have in the seat. I was in a sim league for a while, and it definitely improved my driving because you understand where the apexes are, you understand where the turns are, you understand what to look for when you're out on the road and how to let people pass you and things like that. But without the G-force, it is hard, and you can get the G-force, you just got to spend for it, right? You
yeah.
have to get motion into your sim, which you're just getting up into, as much as you want to spend. I've seen sim rigs that are $100,000.
Yeah.
So it's just how much do you want to spend? How good do you want to be on the sim? But most people will tell you they obviously prefer the real thing. Um, but it is nice on the sim that you're not going through tires and brake pads and
So that
so
leads me to a question for you. When you were at MSR in your 911, that time we went there and you got to experience the track in person versus all the sim racing experience you have, how did you like that transition? What did you think when you were able to be on the track
oh, I
that
love
first
being
time?
on the track more, obviously. You get the feel, you hear the motor, everything's much more engaging. But I will say because I had done the sim as much as I had, I felt like I knew where to put the car.
Yeah.
Right, and MSR was my second track experience. My first one was in Atlanta at the Porsche
Oh, at the Porsche
Experience.
Experience Center,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so, I mean, but no, it's interesting, like, there's so much of it that transfers, right? Knowing where to put the car, knowing when you wanna turn in, um, you just, you just know your way around a track better. I don't think there's any substitute for seat time, right? But you can definitely get a head start by doing some work behind the sun. So
Yeah. Yeah, I remember 25 years ago when I was racing, there were some drivers that would use at that time, I don't know how the sims were back then, but they would use some sims to learn new tracks, and I kinda I didn't really think much of it at the time, but I think now in the last 20 years, that has just grown exponentially
oh
and has
yeah.
become such a bigger part of racing worldwide, is using sims, for whatever series you're in.
Well, and I want to say, I mean, like there was recently a movie that came out about
Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo,
Yeah,
right? That kid had never been in a racetrack.
yeah.
He just only been on a sim or a computer, and was able to make that transition at the highest level. Obviously, there's an adjustment period, but the fact that you can do that, right? Like it now becomes kind of this breeding ground for aptitude, right? Do you have the aptitude, the skill set
Uh-huh.
to where you could possibly be a good
Yeah, it's
driver?
pretty interesting, and that being a true story, I think that kind of set the bar for maybe some future, careers starting in sim and moving into
Right.
professional racing, and I think people don't understand when you're driving a car, and I don't care if it's a driver education event that you're doing for the day with Porsche Club or with any club at a track, or it's professional racing, the amount of mental awareness or the amount of mental it strains on you to drive like that, because when I used to put on track events, I would have 16-year-olds up through, you know, people, much older, that would come to my track events. And I remember one gentleman in particular telling me that he did the track day with me, and then the next day he went to play racquetball. And he goes, "Man, I've never played racquetball so good in my life," because he was so mentally focused from
Right.
driving that he carried that focus into the racquetball. And I think it's just, there's a lot of mental side to racing as well as the physical side to it as well.
Yeah, the physical side is definitely not talked about as much. I know after my first track experience, I had been on the track for about 45 minutes, and when I got out of the car, the G forces, you kind of have this like, oh wow, like when you're in the seat and you're engaged and you're focused, you're not really feeling anything,
Yeah.
and then the car stops and you get out and you're just kind
Yeah.
of like, whoa, what's going on here? And
Yeah.
so
Get your sea legs back,
that's
right?
right, you get your sea legs back, and so, yeah. Well, man, I appreciate you coming out, Ed, and I appreciate you telling us all about your ride,
Mhm.
and, if you want to have your car on Why This Ride, please fill out our form and let us know. Maybe you'll be able to come on the show and tell us all about, why you chose the vehicle you chose. So until next time, I'm Jason with Why This Ride. Thank you so much, Ed Paez, for coming out.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.